Looks like the DOJ and Donald Trump's overreach as it relates to Washington, D.C. has come to an abrupt halt as D.C. is taking action against the Trump administration. Can you explain what just happened in court?
Yeah, Brian, it took them a few days, but the D.C. city leadership, the mayor, and the attorney general for the District of Columbia have just filed suit. They have sued Donald Trump and his administration for what plainly and obviously seems to be the attempted unlawful takeover of the D.C. City Police Department, the Washington Metropolitan Police Department, MPD. And I'll tell you, when you read the law that applies to what a president of the United States can do vis-a-vis the local city police department in Washington, D.C., this looks like it should be a sure winner for the mayor of D.C. and for the people of D.C. So we'll wait and see if the federal judge in Washington, D.C. grants the request that's been made by the mayor and the D.C. Attorney General for a preliminary injunction to put a stop to what Donald Trump is trying to do. And Brian, I have to talk about one of the most offensive aspects of what Pam Bondi and Donald Trump just tried to do. The chief of police for the Metropolitan Police Department, Pamela Smith, extremely experienced and highly regarded, I would say universally well-regarded chief of police. Pam Bondi tried to push her out of her job and install this sort of mediocre white guy, this Trump flunky. Pamela Smith happens to not only be an African-American female chief of police, but she was the first African-American female chief of police of the United States Park Police Service in the 230-year history of the Park Police. That is a federal law enforcement agency. She was the first black female to hold that position. She is now the chief of police for the Metropolitan Police Department in D.C. And Pam Bondi just said, no, you're out, and we're going to install this DEA guy, Terry Cole, to take your place. I mean, to say that is offensive, but you know, Chief of Police Smith said in her 30 years of law enforcement, this is probably the single most dangerous thing she has ever seen national leadership do, because they're basically cutting the legs out of the Metropolitan Police Department, upending it, and putting somebody who has no familiarity with policing in D.C. or how MPD operates in charge of that nearly 4,000 strong police force. And I can only hope that the federal judge in D.C. will put an immediate stop to this law enforcement insanity.
What does it look like if Donald Trump gets what he wants? What is the natural conclusion of, the insidious plans that he's trying to put forward here?
Chaos. Chaos in Washington, D.C. You're going to take an outsider, somebody with no familiarity with running the city police department, and say, you're in charge. And, Pam Bondi has said, no, he's going to redo everything, all of their rules and their procedures. They are governed by what are called general orders, police department general orders. And, this guy, this outsider is going to gallop in and change everything. I mean, to say that that is disruptive to the operation of the police department in Washington, D.C. is a gross understatement. As Chief of Police Smith said, this will endanger everybody in D.C., the residents and the tourists alike.
But why would Trump want to do it? What benefit does this pose for him by virtue of taking over the Metropolitan Police Department? Like, what's the shiny reward for him by engaging in this whole scheme?
Consolidates power. He can say, you know what, I'm taking over the local police force of Washington, D.C. that is under the control by law of the mayor of the city, and I'm going to redirect all of their efforts into, chasing down potentially undocumented immigrants, right? Because, this is what Donald Trump does. The other thing, Brian, I think he is trying to destroy institutions of government, weaken institutions of government, and thereby undermine the confidence that we, the people, have in those institutions. Listen, when part of his plan to seize law enforcement control of D.C. included taking 120 FBI agents out of the Washington field office, that is the local office that handles federal crime and federal criminal investigations in D.C. He said, I'm going to take 120 of them. That is a healthy percentage of those agents, and put them out on street patrol. You know, first of all, that is offensive both to the FBI agents. Think about it. They are involved in federal investigations as we speak into things like terrorism, interstate kidnapping, you know, widespread financial fraud that impacts people nationwide, and things like child sex trafficking. He's going to take them out of those assignments, away from those investigations, and make them street patrol officers. Mind you, they have no training to be street patrol officers. It's not only offensive and dangerous to the FBI agents, it is also offensive to MPD's street patrol officers who have specialized training and expertise in, for example, the Fourth Amendment rules when it comes to searches and seizures, interrogations, what they can do when they're interacting with not only citizens but potential suspects on the streets of D.C. And you know, Brian, I actually gave the Metropolitan Police Department classes for years on the Fourth Amendment search and seizure rules and prohibitions, on custodial interrogations, the do's and don'ts. And let me tell you, if you are not familiar with the case law, the precedent, as it has interpreted the Fourth Amendment over the years, it's a recipe for disaster, because what you're going to do is send people out to patrol the streets. They're going to make arrests, but we're not going to be able to successfully prosecute the cases that they bring to us, the prosecutors in D.C., because they didn't know how to conduct a proper stop, a proper search, a proper seizure, or a proper custodial interrogation. Again, this is lose, 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 but chaos is the point. Donald Trump wants to be in control of everything.
Glenn, is there anything to suggest when this thing actually goes through the court process, whether he's going to be successful or unsuccessful? Is this like a nakedly doomed effort on his part? Or, you know, depending on the judge he goes in front of, might there actually be some chance that he will succeed here?
I think it's going to be very difficult for the Trump administration to win this legal battle. It's in court presently. The suit was just filed. Hearings are underway. And I have to believe a federal judge will put a temporary stop, issue either a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction to freeze everything in place before things begin to unravel and get even more dangerous in the streets of D.C. But don't take my word for it. Let me read the couple of sentences that set out the legal standard by which a president of the United States can use the resources of local law enforcement in Washington, D.C. Now, mind you, Brian, this is D.C. specific. This can't be done in any other city in the country. Only he can attempt it in D.C. because D.C. is a federal city and not a state. Here is what the law provides the president can do. It says, whenever the president of the United States determines that special conditions of an emergency nature exist which require the use of the Metropolitan Police Force for federal purposes, not for city law enforcement purposes, for federal purposes, he, the president, may direct the mayor to provide him, and the mayor shall provide such services of the Metropolitan Police Force as the president may deem necessary and appropriate, and it can only last for 30 days without Congress passing a law extending the deadline. Brian, nowhere in the statute I just read to our viewers does it say he can push the chief of police out and install his own flunky. He can seize control entirely of the Washington Metropolitan Police Department and redo all law enforcement protocol and procedures and general orders. Nowhere in that statute does it authorize this. I think this will be a relatively easy call for a federal judge.
Glenn, for folks watching that are not in Washington, D.C., why does this matter? Why should anybody in the other 50 states out here see what's happening and care? Like, what does this represent in terms of the broader fight that Trump is waging?
Yeah, they should care for at least two reasons, Brian. First of all, to answer your question, with regard to the bigger picture, you know, Donald Trump has already said he wants to bring these kind of moves to cities across the country. Now, mind you, as we just discussed, this statute is specific to Washington, D.C. because it's a federal city. The 50 states do not have any laws that allow a president of the United States to swoop in and take control of, permanently, temporarily, or otherwise, any city law enforcement agencies. Doesn't matter to Donald Trump. When has he ever felt constrained by the law? He has already announced he wants to bring this kind of an effort that he is engaged in D.C. to cities around the country. That is one reason why everybody should be worried. The other reason is because this will absolutely endanger the people of the District of Columbia. And I would like to think that people around the country really care about what is happening to their fellow citizens and, anybody in any of the 50 states and the District of Columbia.
Well, look, this is obviously very important, not just for D.C., to your exact point, but look, I'm coming to you from Los Angeles. When I was interviewing Gavin Newsom on Thursday, there were federal agents that came to the spot that Newsom was issuing his press conference at to be able to announce the redraw of these California maps, and they did that so they could kind of intimidate the folks who were there, so that they could offer up a show of force. And so, D.C. is not the only place where Donald Trump is trying to offer up these shows of force and really weaponize the federal government against his political opponents. The fact that he's doing it in Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., really signals that this is not just isolated incidences. These are not just isolated opportunities for him. He wants to be able to deploy this around the rest of the country. And so these are test cases for him to be able to do exactly that, which is why it's so important for every individual city, every individual state, or as is the case with Washington, D.C., the D.C. Attorney General and Mayor, to be able to push back against this stuff so that Donald Trump doesn't think that he has free runway, doesn't feel emboldened to be able to export this strategy onto other states. And in particular, I'm looking at, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Detroit, Michigan, the places that he wants to be able to send his goons in come election time, because there are these liberal bastions, these Democratic strongholds that pose quite a problem for Republicans when it comes time for elections. And so, it's important to keep an eye on what's happening, not just right now, but what it signals for the future. So for those who are watching, if you'd like to stay on top of this stuff as it continues to progress, please make sure to subscribe. If you're not yet subscribed to these channels, I'm going to put the links to both of them right here on the screen. It's the best way to support our work. It is completely free, and it's a great way to show some support for independent media. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.